Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years, and this brewery are known for their New England hazy IPAs, and they do some very, very nice beers within this style bracket. So the one that we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases, and it's supposed to be pretty good actually, so I'm curious to see how it turns out. Fingers crossed it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to go to a little place called Nora near Örebro out to the west of Stockholm, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Apex Brewing. So this one is called the 844 IPA. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and as we normally have from Apex Brewing Company, this one is a New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, pretty much all of the beers we've had from this brewery so far have been hazy New Englands. It was only quite recently that they released something that wasn't a hazy New England, and that was their Keller Pills, which I thought was very, very nice in fact. So yeah, nice to return to IPAs with these guys. So like I say, hopefully this one carries on in the same vein as the other ones that we've had before, but this one has a hop in it, I believe, that we haven't had from this brewery actually, and it is quite an interesting one, but we'll come to that a little bit later on. So looking forward to this. Let's crack on with the review and see how we get on. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Apex Brewing Company before, and you will no doubt see more reviews added to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to. And as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Apex Brewing Company once again. So Apex Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in a little place called Nora, which is to the north of Örebro out to the west of Stockholm, and this company was founded back in 2017 by Daniel Gatchitz and Niklas Lundgren. Both of these guys are musicians, with Niklas having played in the band 59 Times the Pain and Daniel playing in The Voice of a Generation. But Daniel and Niklas are responsible for the brewing operations, but there are a few others involved in the company as well. This is Leif Carlson, Ola Eriksson, and a Roger Hjelm, and they deal with the kind of business side of things from what I understand. But they started off with a 500 litre brew kit and 6 fermentation tanks, and they were selling their beers in the local area before getting them into Systembolaget. The very first beer that I tried from these guys was the single hop, and that came, I believe, back in mid 2017 as the result of, maybe 2018 actually, as the result of a recommendation from a subscriber, and I was very, very impressed with that beer. But they continued to expand from there. In 2018, they brewed around 35,000 litres of beer over the course of the year with about 25 different varieties, all of which were kind of New England hazy IPAs. And in 2019, they brewed around 120,000 litres of beer. Over the following years, they've continued to expand their fermentation capacity, and this year in 2021, they announced that they would move to a new premises in the Bettorp district of Örebro in the autumn, and this new facility that they're going to have will see them upgrade their 500 litre brew kit to a 2,000 litre brew kit, and they'll have several new tanks in there as well. And this means that they'll be able to export their beers far more widely, and I guess they'll maybe start brewing a few different styles as well over the next little while. I would love to see these guys do a proper old school West Coast IPA, because the lager beer that we had from these guys recently I thought was very, very nicely done actually. So yeah, I would love to see a proper old school West Coast IPA from these guys at some point, and a black IPA I think could be a really interesting proposition from Apex Brewing Company as well. But as of August 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 85 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and they tend to release a couple of different beers every month actually. So the best way to get a hold of the Apex beers, if you want them, you know, right out the tank essentially, is to go onto glassblanken.se. They release pretty much everything through there, and then it comes out at the start of the following month through Systembolaget. So yeah, that is one of the things. You can pay quite a bit more and get them through Glassbank and put SA straight away, or you can wait, maybe 2 weeks or something like that and get them through Systembolaget. And that's what I tend to do. I always get these beers as part of my local Småskalig assortment. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Apex Brewing Company for the moment. These guys are probably one of the more recognisable Swedish craft beer names at the moment. They are exporting their beers across Europe. But if you like your New England hazy IPAs, you will be impressed with what these guys have to offer you. But yeah, that's all I can tell you about them for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a taste of this beer and see how we go. So as you can see, this beer is a 440ml can. It's got the typical artwork that we expect of Apex Brewing Company, you know, the sort of Illuminati kind of thing. We always get a different animal on these cans, of course. So this week we have this month I should say, we have the sheep. You can see they've got their typical motto, music, people and beer. But yeah, 6.5% New England Hazy IPA, this one. This beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskalig assortment in Systembolaget for August of 2021. I believe I forgot to mention that earlier on. It cost me 45 Swedish kronor, which is standard for a Swedish single New England IPA. So 45 Swedish kronor is €4.50, about £4 sterling, somewhere in the region of $5 American, just so those of you watching in different parts of the world have a price reference. And yeah, you know, normally if it's an import beer, you will pay, depending on where it's from of course, you will pay an extra 10 kroners for the import company share. So the Danish ones, for example, you would probably pay about 50 or 55 Swedish kronor for those, just so that the import company can get a little share of things. But yeah, to tell you the stats about this beer then. So this one is hopped with Cashmere, Simcoe and Mosaic. All three hops that we know quite well. Cashmere, of course, gives you that lovely kind of melony note to it. It's got a lot of lemon lime in it, which is great. I think it's about 14% alpha acid, if I remember correctly, but an American hop nonetheless. Simcoe, as we know, big, soft, juicy passion fruits, 12% alpha acid. Mosaic, a slightly more oily kind of tangerine note, again 14% alpha acid, both American. But the malt base in this one is Maris Otter Extra Pale, naked and torrefied oats, along with some flaked wheat. And as often with these Apex Brewing Company beers, this one uses a WLP 66 London Fog yeast. So yeah, I think this one should be quite interesting. But let's get it out and into the glass and see how we go. Very curious to see what this one has in store for us. It feels like a wee while since I've had an Apex IPA, in fact. So yeah, we'll get this guy out and into the glass. I think we've got about 3/4 of it, yeah, about 3/4 of it in the glass for the moment, and that'll do for the appearance and things. And we'll put the rest in before we taste it. So anyway, before the head disappears on this one, you can see that it's poured with about a 1/3 half finger of a frothy, I would say perfect white head. That is fading away just to be a very thin kind of foamy layer just now, but I think it's going to leave a nice kind of bigger ring just around the edge of the glass there. But in terms of colour, we can see this one is a lovely, quite bright yellow colour. It's a bit like a kind of mango juice. I always like comparing the New England IPAs to different fruit juices because that's just what their appearance reminds me of. I've said this in many videos before, but yeah, there's one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass with this one, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there. And the head, as we say, has faded away to be a very kind of thin, foamy layer. But the level of haze on this one is, yeah, pretty solid for a 6.5%er. So remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. That determines the magnitude of the colour of the beer. 2, the length of your wort boil. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Although it doesn't, change the magnitude of the colour too much, but those are the two main factors when it comes to IPAs. Any barrel aging that you do and any adjuncts that you use will also, affect the colour a little bit. But those two factors tend to come into play when you're talking about sour beers rather than anything else. But yeah, the level of haze in this one, as we say, is pretty solid for a 6.5%er. I've seen hazier ones, I've seen less hazy ones, but the level of haze depends on the type of yeast that you use. the oat content and the wheat content. This can vary from recipe to recipe, brewery to brewery, and so on. There's not really a kind of written in stone rule about this one. So yeah, certainly it looks the part of a New England IPA. Nothing untoward about the appearance of this beer. So nothing more to say about the appearance for this one, I think. Let's go on to the aroma and see how we get on. Very curious about this beer. Oh yeah. Now, Cashmere comes out of this right away. Now, I do have some really sort of could you say nostalgic? I've got quite vivid experiences, vivid memories of the Cashmere hop, and it comes from a brewery in Slovenia called Green Gold Brewing, who are based in I want to say Celje, but they're in I can't remember the name of the exact town, but they're in the Savinja Valley in Slovenia. So these guys, it's a brewery that basically came out of the Roynick family hop farm, which is one of the biggest hop farms in Europe. They love the Cashmere hop down there. They grow their own. But the thing with Cashmere is quite a few of the beers that I had from them had Cashmere hop in them, and Cashmere just interacts in this really, really interesting way with this London fog yeast, and there's just such a distinctive aroma. So this beer really reminds me of those Green Gold IPAs that I had maybe about 2 years ago now, actually. So it just, you get the melon, you get the lemon lime, and you get that farmhousey kind of thing to it. It gives you this woody, crackery, bready sort of farmhousey kind of thing with all that melon and lemon lime kind of quality. So yeah, the aroma of this one for me is a little bit nostalgic in that sense to those Slovenian IPAs that we had about 2 years ago, actually. And I do recommend you try some of those Green Gold beers. They're very, very nice, actually. And if you get the chance to try some of the Slovenian hopped IPAs, you've got the Styrian Dragon, the Styrian Wolf, and a few other hop varieties from down there that are very nice, but they're just not produced in such a big volume, unfortunately. But this beer really reminds me of those Green Gold beers, actually, that Davor very kindly the brewery themselves sent me the Green Gold ones, and Davor let me try something from them in the early days, of course. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, this beer certainly does have a wee nostalgia kick to it. I love beers that give you contextual cues like this. But anyway, what I'm going to say about this one is the aroma of this is the backbone, the malty and yeasty backbone of this one is quite typical from what we've had from Apex Brewing Company before. Now, as I've said to you, when it comes to New England IPAs, for me there are 6 different directions you can take these in. They could be more farmhousey and yeasty, they could be rye leaning and grainy, wheaty and bitey, oaty and creamy, barley malt leaning and bready, or they can be a little bit more kind of brown sugary leaning and sweet. And quite often the beers will display multiple characteristics, and it's a balancing act. But yeah, this one is a typical Apex Brewing Company beer. I mean, these guys always have a bit of the farmhousey quality, you always get a bit of wheaty bitiness, and you get a sort of soft barley malty quality out of these ones as well. The oats kind of come and go in these beers. I think that's the variable with the malt bases. Apex, but always a bit farmhousey, a bit woody and crackery and things, a bit wheaty and bitey, and then quite a bit of smooth barley malt out of them as well, I would say. So yeah, the aroma of this one I think is quite typical for an Apex Brewing Company beer. But yeah, let's just break that down a little bit more for you and describe it a wee bit more succinctly. So as we say, the backbone of this beer, for me, there's a very kind of smooth white bready character out of this one, and it has a bit of bread crust to it as well. It's almost like you've got a fresh hedgehog bread roll, actually, and when you get that sort of floury note, you've got a bit of flour, the bread has just been freshly baked and you've still got a wee bit of flour on the bottom of it. That's what the backbone of this beer really reminds me of. So you've got little elements of knekkebrud or crackery sort of things mixed in with that. There's 1 or 2 little woody aromas in there as well, but yeah, there's a sort of as we say, that floury white bready base in there, a bit of bread crust, the crackery, knekkebrud type thing, and yeah, as we say, a couple of woody notes in there as well. So yeah, these are quite interesting. These are the sort of kind of very slightly farmhousey kind of notes that I'm talking about. So at the very back of the nose, you get that sort of farmhousey, airy kind of note to it, which I can certainly appreciate. So yeah, as we say, an airy kind of farmhousey note to it. You do get a little bit of wheaty bitiness at the back of the nose as well. You can smell a wee bit of a smoother oaty character in the middle of that, but for me the oats take a back seat to the sort of yeasty, farmhousey, crackery kind of things, and the wheat that I was talking about too. You know, I would say as well that this one, in the middle of the nose, you know, you do get a little tiny touch of that Werther's Original kind of brown sugary sort of thing to it, but that's quite minimal. As I say, this is, you know, for me the backbone of this beer is about the kind of balance between the yeast and the barley malt, definitely, and as I say, just a wee bit of a wheaty character in this. But you know, that is the sort of signature thing. I've always found the Apex beers to be barley malt leaning and more towards that kind of yeasty, kind of slightly farmhousey end of the New England IPA spectrum. But yeah, that's I always like, you know, these beers, they can vary up within that sort of part of the spectrum that they always base themselves in. So yeah, I think that covers the malty yeasty section of the aroma of this beer. Hoppy wise, it's kind of what you'd expect. There is a wee bit of earthiness in there, but it's got quite a big, bright floral green component to it, I would say. Some nice floral aromaticity as well, actually. So I really like how the floral aromaticity goes together in this one too. So yeah, quite a nice, bright, sort of more zesty character as well. But yeah, the green component to this one is quite nice actually, and you know, cashmere has this really distinctive, very bright floral note to it, and it's quite pungent as well. So bear that in mind. That's going to stick with you with this beer. But a little bit of earthiness, which will be from the mosaic, very bright floral green component, which will be from all of them. But the cashmere just makes it a bit distinctive. Then you've got a big grassy zestiness there too. But the fruity side of the beer is definitely quite interesting. So you can smell a little bit of the kind of passion fruity element from the Simcoe in there. Simcoe always gives you these kind of smoother passion fruity notes in a New England IPA, whereas it's more oily in a West Coaster. But you certainly get that kind of oily but still quite smooth passion fruit in there. Underneath that, of course, though, you get a hell of a lot of melon. That's the cashmere. And then it's interesting because the mosaic, you can smell that slightly juicier tangerine in there, but you've also got a little bit of the pungency of the lime in this one and a bit of the kind of sharper lemon as well. So the thing is, when you put cashmere into a beer, I always find that cashmere has the power to kind of dominate the aroma, and it does that in here. But you can still pick out, you know, the tangerine oranges from the mosaic and the kind of juicy passion fruits from the Simcoe. But yeah, cashmere is one of these hops that has that really kind of dominant presence, I guess we could say, in the beer actually, and you certainly get that in this one. So yeah. I think that kind of summarises the aroma of this one quite nicely, to be honest with you. But yeah, I was thinking about the name of this. It didn't say why they'd called it 844 IPA, but you know, you can kind of see that 844 is probably when you'd roll out of bed and wake up and, you know, run to work. But yeah, you know, the cashmere presence in this one, you know, the pungency, the sort of citrusy punch in this one that you get, I think, is really quite interesting. So yeah, melon, passion fruit, lemon and lime, and also the tangerine oranges, which are all the things you'd expect from these hops. But yeah, a very dominant cashmere note in this. But yeah, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of this beer before you get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we try this one now. So that's the rest of it out into the glass. Let me just line this up for you. And I think we should have a go at this. So yeah, the 844 IPA, 6.5% New England IPA from Apex Brewing Company and Nora, soon to be Örebro, here in Sweden. A very, very well respected brewery these days. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Oh yeah, that is very nice. Now, I'm picking up with this one. This beer actually does seem a little bit almost smoother in things than some of the other beers that we've had from Apex in the past, which is quite interesting in fact. So I'm wondering if it's just the fact, I'm trying to remember if the last beer that I had from Apex was indeed that lager beer. It could well have been. I'm trying, this beer just feels a little bit thicker and a wee bit smoother to me on first impression compared to some of the other Apex ones that we've had in the past. And I'm just wondering if it's because there's been a little bit more of a gap between this one and my last Apex New England IPA. So yeah, I'm just I'm kind of curious about that actually. But I will say, this one is a big kind of citrusy, it's got a big oily citrusy kind of note to it, this one. It makes it a difference again. And as I say, the cashmere comes out of this one right away. Cashmere is just such a dominating hop actually. It's just got a big dominating presence to it. So yeah, the way this goes together I think is very, very nice. So a thumbs up to Apex Brewing Company. But let's break down the flavour of this beer for you a little bit more succinctly. So straight away across the middle third of your palate in this beer, you can feel there is a backbone of a slightly knekkebraudy type thing there, that kind of crackery base. You can feel that going right across the middle of your palate. On top of that, you have a big smooth white bready sort of thing that goes right across the middle third of your palate and into the back third of your palate underneath, as I say, a bit of knekkebraued. If we focus on that middle third of your tongue, just knekkebraued, the kind of crackery sort of thing, big smooth white bready character in there. Then at either end of it, you've got a big, you've got a little bit of a bigger, you get a little bit of that kind of bread crusty, grainy sort of thing, and on top of that you can get a bit of the wheaty character just smoothing the whole beer out. So yeah, it does, the more that you drink of this beer, I think it does smoothen out a little bit actually. So yeah, the sort of bready notes you get out of this one just feel a little bit thicker in this one. So the kind of torrefied, the flaked wheat in this one and the torrefied oats and stuff you get like that, you can sort of feel those just combining in this one. So sitting on top of that sort of smooth wheaty layer, on top of that, if you go down the middle line of your tongue, you can feel a sort of bit of thickness from the oats. And as you move further out, from the centre of your palate towards the edges of the tongue there, you can get you can get a little bit more of a kind of smoother thing in there as well. You can feel that from the centre of your palate the oats are quite thick and you do get a wee bit of dryness out of it, but as you move out towards the edges of the palate you can feel that they become a little bit drier and more. My phone alarm going off then, I thought I turned that off. But yeah, you can feel a little bit of the kind of more dry oaty characters coming out of this one. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. But on top of that oaty there, there's a little circle in the middle of your palate there, and you can feel there's that kind of Werther's original butter candy, butterscotchy type thing. So you get a little bit of that, and it's a wee bit more concentrated in the dead centre of the palate. But that's, those are your boozy elements coming out of the beer. But I feel that kind of summarises the middle third of your palate quite well in this one. Getting a wee bit of gas out of this actually. Maybe just wasn't quite ready for this one when I opened up the can. But anyway, that covers the middle third of your palate in this beer. Let's move on to the other parts of it. If you go to that border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a wee bit of a bready build up in there, a wee bit of bread crust, but the base of that back third of your palate is quite similar. You get the knekkebraued, you get the thicker kind of white bready layer out of it, you get the wheat kind of sitting on top of that, and the wheat has a little bit more bitiness towards the very back of your palate. Then on top of all of that you've got the more airy, yeasty kind of element to it as well, so you can feel that slightly more airy bready character coming out of this one, and it's that more airy, yeasty kind of note that gives you those little farmhousey qualities that I was talking about as well. It's a sort of woody, flowery kind of bread that you get out of that, and that lingers there into the aftertaste. So when you start at the back of the palate with this beer, you can feel the flavour is a little bit taller, and then as you come further forward it just condenses down, and as you go into that middle third of your palate you can feel the flavours are a wee bit more kind of squashed together. So yeah, I do like how this one goes about its business in that sense. So yeah, malty, yeasty backbone in this one is nice and quite typical actually. of Apex, but I feel the bready notes are a wee bit thicker in this one, which is interesting. But yeah, hoppy side of things, and this is where this beer stands out to me a little bit. Cashmere all the way. So back corners of the palate, you certainly get a wee bit of earthiness there. As you move further forward, there's a wee bit of herbal quality, but as you push towards the kind of front corners of the palate, you certainly get more of a big floral aromatic note to this one. And the floral aromatic note is quite bright. I wouldn't describe it as spicy, but it's got quite a pungent brightness to it, if that makes sense. Round the front curve of the palate, it's got a little bit of a more kind of wet, leafy, kind of grassy character in there, and you can feel some of the citrusy, you can feel some of the sort of zesty notes coming out from the cashmere in there as well. So yeah, I'm referring mainly to cashmere in this beer review, but it's just such a dominating presence in this beer. But yeah, the green component for this one is quite distinctive, as they say. But let's focus on that front third of your palate and the fruitiness of the beer. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again there's a wee bit of a bready build up in there, a wee bit of bread crust, and then the base of that front third of your palate is a really nice smooth white bready note to it. You can feel there's a little bit of thickness in there as well, and then sitting on top of that you've got that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So if we focus on the back half of that front third of your palate, you do get a wee bit of the more pungent passion fruity notes from the Simcoe in there, but as you move further forward it mellows out a bit. But underneath this, the backbone, sitting on top of that bready base of the beer, it's the cashmere. It's almost like the cashmere is the backbone, and then the mosaic and the Simcoe are subtleties. They're adding subtlety and depth to the fruit, but I think it's the cashmere that's dominating this. I'd be curious to know what the ratios of these hops are. Is it a 33 mix, or is it like a 50, 25, 25? I don't know, because I've always just had them, I do wonder whether my sort of preconception, if you like, of cashmere and its dominance is, it could be just the ratio of the dry hopping or whatever. So remember, New England IPAs rely on late addition and dry hops to give you all these flavours. West Coast IPAs have got a bit more early addition hop, which is the one that gives you the bitterness, of course. But yeah, I do wonder how much of my sort of, pre-contrived notion, my sort of perception of cashmere is. I do wonder if there is something there that needs to be considered. The fact that, potentially, whether it's the hop that's pungent or it's just the ratio that it's used in that makes it so. But yeah, it certainly feels, as I say, the base. If we talk about the base of the fruity part of the beer, the melon sits on top of the kind of bready notes in the back half of the front third of your tongue. Then it's the lemon limey notes on the front half, and on top of the back half you've got the Simcoe notes. This thing, I turned it off. But yeah, on top of that you've got on top of that kind of melony note, you've got the kind of Simcoe passion fruity notes, and then on top of the lemon limey notes in the front half you've got the more oily tangerine qualities from the mosaic. So yeah, it's kind of interesting just to see how this pieces together in that sense. But yeah, melon, lemon lime underneath, passion fruit, and kind of tangerine notes on top, and then you can feel the lime gets a wee bit stronger just behind the front tip of the tongue, and that's when you've got all the mixing with the kind of grassy esters in there too. But yeah, certainly quite a citrusy hit, this one, rather than being soft and tropical or anything like that. And as I say, I just find cashmere to be quite dominant in this. And it's just such a distinctive hop, although in fairness, the further you go into the aftertaste with it, I think you do get a wee bit more of the mosaic out of this one, which I think works. But yeah, it's a lovely beer nonetheless. I think this is a really solid one from Apex, and again it's a wee bit different because of that citrusy leaning that it has. But yeah, I think we can round off this review with the mouthfeel then. So this one is, straight in the middle of the road, mid-bodied IPA, smooth carbonation. It's got that typical bit of Nordic kind of cleanliness to it. But as I say, this beer has that smoothness. I've always found these Apex beers to be a little bit kind of farmhousey and barley malt leaning, and you get that kind of type of smoothness out of this one. It's not really creamy, it's not really, so bitey or whatever. It's just a smooth, kind of easy drinking New England IPA, this one. So yeah, kind of typical mouthfeel, straight in the middle of the road, which is what we've often had from Apex Brewing before. In terms of the IBU count in this beer, I think it's a fairly standard 30 IBU. This is standard for the style, of course. The malt base, as we've said, it's got a bit of smoothness to it. There's a wee bit of bitiness there behind, a wee bit of a kind of, you do get one or two little creamy notes to it and a little touch of sweetness, but you know, as I say, it's a farmhousey, smooth sort of thing I think you get out of this beer rather than anything else. And then the fruity side of the beer, as we've said, is really citrusy leaning, but there are wee elements of kind of tropical notes in there as well. I would say the fruity notes in this beer are quite juicy rather than being sort of oily or whatever. But yeah, some juicy and citrusy rather than being, you know, oily and tropical or anything like that. But yeah, an interesting beer, this one. And as I said, it has, you know, the typical apex backbone to it. It's the fruits, I think, that really set this one apart a little bit. But you know, cashmere, as I say, very punchy hop in my experience. So interesting to see how Apex have used this one. As far as memory goes, I haven't had that in an Apex beer before. I'd love to see these guys use Styrian Wolf actually. I think that would be a really interesting one to see them use, because that's got a really soft mellow note to it. It doesn't have the kind of lemon limey characters that Cashmere does actually. So yeah, seeing these guys use a couple of the Slovenian aroma hops could be quite interesting, and some more New Zealand hops would also be cool. You know, the Raka or the Ruakas and the Motueka. They've used Motueka I think quite a few times, but to see them use some of the lesser known New Zealand hops could also be quite interesting. Barbe Rouge from France, the raspberry leaning one, and Eureka from America as well, these more berry leaning hops. That could be an interesting direction for Apex going forward as well. But yeah, I think we should leave it at that for this review. If you haven't had an Apex New England IPA before, I do recommend you have a look at it. But yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. This one was the 844 IPA, 6.5% ABV, New England, from Apex Brewing Company in Nora near Örebro here in Sweden, a brewery that you definitely want to check out. But thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Apex Brewing Company's social media. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Apex Brewing Company, and we will return to these guys again quite soon. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you guys in the next review.